I wanted to run a magazine. I wanted to create great products. My mum got cancer, and I thought to me that get on and do the things that are important, because there's not as much time as you think there might be. So use your founder, use your CEO, find your ambassador, and use them, deploy them in the right way. Make them understand that their voice is important. And motivation is something which fluctuates and is challenging to maintain. And I urge you to keep going. There's a wonderful Churchill quote which I heard recently: is when you're going through hell, keep going, because you're probably doing something right.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Founders Stories. I'm delighted today to be joined on the couch by Joel Harrison of B2B Marketing. That's the name of his company. He didn't invent B2B Marketing. I'm excited about this conversation because, as you know, I'm very passionate about the demand gen side of go-to-market, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Joel has to say, not just about B2B marketing, but also his journey and how he got to where he is today. So without further ado, welcome, Joel.
Thank you.
It has been a while since we first met, so we got here in the end. I got you on the couch eventually. Thank you for coming to talk to us today.
You're absolutely welcome. I'm flattered to be invited.
I'm finding so much need at the moment in the clients that I'm talking to in the startup scale-up world for all kind of elements of marketing, whether that be content, whether it be even PPC type stuff. It's like the traditional stuff. It really seems to have more of a seat at the table at the moment. It used to be, okay, let's hire a load of salespeople, and then marketing is kind of a bit of an afterthought. But I'm starting to see a small shift, not probably quick as I'd like to see, but I'm starting to see a shift now into, okay, let's start at the top and work our way down when we're building our go-to-market. So before we talk about you, I'd love to know a little bit about B2B marketing. What are the problems that you typically see that you're solving, and why do you exist?
So B2B marketing as a company was launched in 2004. And when you said, and quite rightly, you said we didn't invent B2B marketing, but we kind of did at the same time, because if you were around back then, and you look far too young to have been around working in the environment back then, everyone, marketing was widely understood. And I'm a journalist, I come from a publishing background. There were about 12 magazines focusing on marketing. None of them acknowledged anything called B2B. None of them acknowledged there was actually a really fascinating, huge, and very, very important part of marketing that was servicing businesses, marketing to other businesses. If you read the marketing press, it was all about consumer brands, consumer products, consumer services. There's a huge gap in the market. And so a friend of mine from university, he was a marketer from the kind of legal sector. We're kind of kicking around some ideas. Would we work, if we could work for ourselves, create a company, what would it be? And we looked at this notion of B2B, and there was just nothing there. And I'm a geek, right? I like geeky stuff. I like complexity. I don't like the simple things. My friends after university said to me, when are you going to go and write for FHM magazine? If you remember FHM, they're that kind of lads mad stuff, and that enormous trend, which is this whole separate conversation. But when you're going to write for one of those kind of sexy consumer magazines, I don't want to write for that. I like complexity. I like understanding things. I like explaining and communicating things, and so that world worked for me. But when we launched, I'm sorry, this is a longer version of the story than you probably wanted. There was nothing there. There was no magazines. There were no exhibitions. That's the world we were operating in those days, and there was no industry kind of environment ecosystem that identified itself as B2B. And so I, at the risk of flattering ourselves, we really were instrumental in creating that. And if you look around now in terms of the market, you Google B2B, and you will come up with loads of agencies. Loads of marketers will identify themselves as being B2B marketers they wouldn't have done before. And the naysayers have kind of disappeared and dropped out. There's a whole ecosystem of technology companies around this. So it's a rich ecosystem. And we launched as a magazine, and we were instrumental in kind of coalescing that into something which kind of made sense. It's a bit like that analogy of like how planets develop, all the gases and kind of matter came together into something. And that's the role that we played back in the day.
Amazing. So I'm learning something now because, well, you are absolutely wrong about one thing, and that is I was absolutely in the world of work by what is it, 2004. It's not that long ago, although it's probably longer than we imagine, isn't it? But I definitely was in the world of work. However, by the time I came into really looking at go-to-market as one big moving part, absolutely there was B2B and B2C. I've never known a world where those two things did not exist on their own. And you deploy different strategies for each. What I've found in the last year or so, because of AI and because of technology, is that they're now starting to kind of merge back again. And there's, people who are buying products for their business buy them in the same kind of way as you would if you were going to buy for yourself. There seems to be a little bit of a similar way of like emotionally buying now. But I have just learned something, because I didn't realize that there was a point that that B2B wasn't a thing.
It certainly wasn't from a marketing perspective. Historically, marketing, the joke, the kind of dismissive thing people used to say, certainly in the B2C side of things, and probably in the B2B sales side of things, is marketing's the colouring in team. They're the events management team. They're the guys who buy the golfing umbrellas. All those derogatory things, because it was a sales support discipline. And there's nothing wrong with sales support. Sales needs support. Sales needs a partner. And holistically, the whole go-to-market notion is something which is, for me, is relatively new, right? That's the last kind of 2 or 3 years, really. It's come over from the States, but there was that. It wasn't seen as a respectable partner. And I think if in the kind of B2B sales thing has been considered purchase, has always been more of a profession, more respected, more needed, more central to the criticality, particularly at enterprise level. But your other point there about is our B2B and B2C coming together? In some ways, yes. If you're selling to smaller businesses and there's only one decision maker, yes. If you're to an extent, but B2B has always, people have always bought emotionally, but they mask it with other things. And this is a whole separate topic of conversation. They'll post rationalize. They will, rational things will get you shortlisted, emotional things will get you bought. And marketing and sales probably have always understood that, and marketing's taken a while to quantify that into the process that it works. And then the relationship between the two of them is perennially a work in progress.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm trying to bring together, because whenever I've managed to do that, that's when really good stuff has happened. And I think we've all been guilty. I mean, I spent a few years in recruitment, and the only time we would ever engage with marketing is when we had a big pitch and we needed a nice deck. And I think that used to be the role of marketing, and they send out the stand 3 days before the expo and that kind of thing. And I've been on an amazing learning journey about the power of marketing over the last couple of years. And I think that it's such a critical part of a business and their journey to market. You can probably try and do it without, but you're going to have a really, really horrible time. Why do that to yourself?
Your point earlier on about the maturity of it. I mean, I think certainly in the trajectory of smaller businesses seems to be that they start off with a CEO. And I, by the way, we've been there as a company, right? You start off with a CEO who does kind of everything, and then you get sales support in quite quickly because you need to do that.
Yeah.
And then the CEO thinks they are the brand, they own the brand, and that's often the case, or it may not be. And then there's a point where marketing has to gradually comes in and has to grow up and become more and more mature, and then start codifying, formalizing, thinking longer term. But it doesn't very rarely happens like that from the very beginning, because your core people, you're probably not going to get a marketing person in when you're 3 people, right?
Yeah. So what does the company do now? You started off as a magazine. Where have you landed in 2026?
So in 2026, the magazine stopped publishing about 3-4 years ago, much to my personal regret, and as a print journalist, a recovering print journalist, I like to say, and because it was still very, very fondly regarded, but it wasn't. We're in a different age now of information consumption, and the magazines aren't really very hard to be part of that and be responsive to what people need, because they want answers now. We've gone from the Google information consumption pattern to the ChatGPT information consumption pattern. They don't just want to get answers now, they want really good customized answers based on quite nuanced and personalized requests. So you have to adapt to that. So the magazine isn't there anymore. What is the center of the business is something called Propolis. And Propolis is a peer-to-peer advisory platform which corporates join, and we have some fantastic clients as part of it. People like BT and people like Deloitte and people like PwC and ServiceNow. So some amazing businesses, and they learn from each other. They learn from the great content we put up there. We learn from all the wealth of insights and data that goes into it, and they learn from all the events that we do. We bring them together. So we had called it a community for a while, but kind of pulling away from that terminology because that's a word that's a bit challenging, and you can make communities work in businesses that are essentially not, well, you have people in different companies that are part of it, but you have to work quite hard to make that work. So we're kind of badging it as peer-to-peer advisory. So they've got the validation of all that respected knowledge, some really respected experts in within this platform, to make better decisions, be better marketers, and be more effective marketing teams. So that's the core of it. And around the outside, we do lots of events, Global ABM Conference, Ignite, the B2B Marketing Awards, and various things like that that legacy publishers always used to do. But personally, I've kind of operationally stepped back from the business now. I'm no longer involved, apart from as a co-owner and as a board director.
Right. Okay. Which brings us beautifully segue into you and your journey, because you've already given us a few spoilers and a couple of snippets of how you started out. Let's go a little bit further back, though. Let's talk about you as a young whippersnapper, if we will. Not too long ago,
many years ago,
and talk to us about your journey from kind of education into the world of work.
Okay, well, I went to university and studied a degree which sounds quite strange, given where I am now. It was basically around urban planning and urban design and things like that, and which has fascinated me. It still does, as being in Clerkenwell. I love it as an environment. I think it's fascinating, the history and the forms of the streets. But when I was at university, I got involved in the student newspaper, which I loved. And I had actually created a kind of a fanzine newsletter thing at sixth form, which I love doing. I love the idea of creating something and sending it out and people feeding back. And that was brilliant. So I thought, well, that's what I want to do. I don't want to go and work in the built environment field or the architectural planning field. I want to do that. So I did that and went to work for some very niche publications, newsletters first of all, then edited my own magazine about marketing, and then that was the point where my business partner James started talking about running our own business, and I knew enough about magazines then to know how it worked, to have confidence that I could do it myself, and that I could do most of the aspects, certainly that production and planning, all that kind of stuff, aspects of it. So that was my background.
Interesting that you picked marketing as a topic, because the passion that you found was for writing and for publishing magazines. Where did you make the link with, and they are going to be about marketing?
That's a good question, and there's an obvious answer, which is my dad was in marketing.
Okay.
So
you had this like fountain of knowledge that you could just draw from, right?
Well, not so much that. He does have a lot of knowledge. His knowledge is in direct marketing, which is a particular niche, and is kind of in the background now. Whereas in the 80s and the 90s, it was very cutting edge.
Yeah.
And he was part of that cutting edge. But it was as much as just it was in my language. And my brothers I've got two brothers, and they're both in kind of aspects of marketing as well.
Right.
It was a thing where ads would be part of what we talk about. And when I was growing up, and I remember my dad quite patronizing. My mum would say, when advert, it was back in the day when there was 4 channels, right? So TV was more of a moment, and an advert would come. My mum, and it was those adverts in those days. Very hard to imagine today, but they were much more cinematic. You had great directors being part of them, weren't there?
I remember going into school and it's like, did you see that advert last night?
Yeah.
Everyone would be talking about ads.
Yeah, exactly. In a way that...
Oh, I didn't see it. I must go home tonight and watch ITV for like 4 hours so I get to see this advert.
So you exactly, it was much more part of everyone's lives. It was not so cinematic and less and they're longer in form and more, they were more it's just more resonant, I think. And we talk about it, and my mum would say, "Well, I don't understand what it was about." My dad would say, "Well, that's because it wasn't aimed at you." And that was a really, and that made me think about. So that was a foundation. But I like creating things. I think visually, and I also like psychology. And if you had to be in a business function, if you think about how a business, I would say a medium-sized or large business works, I'm not going to be in IT. I'm definitely not going to be in finance. I don't think I'd make a very good salesperson. And so marketing is the obvious place for somebody like me in that kind of world. So it felt like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Fantastic. I love that journey, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall at Christmas dinner.
Yeah, we had some fun conversations.
Yeah, and I bet the not to go back to the whole creating decks and being creative, but I bet the table looked nice as well.
Yeah, my mum was very good at that.
Yeah. Lovely. And so you set up on your business quite early then. So you're not a founder that a lot of people that we speak to were in some kind of awful corporate job and kind of had this light bulb moment in the middle of the night that they wanted to do something by themselves. It sounded like that came quite early for you.
So, well, it's a good question, and you're being very kind to me there, because I was 30 when we launched the business, right? It wasn't something I'd ever really had an aspiration to do in the past. When I grow up, I want to run a business. That never was something I wanted to do. I wanted to run a magazine. I wanted to create great products. I wanted to say something, to have the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and something which resonant with people. And that's what I was learning how to do. And the conversation that I had with my friend James about this kind of was a bit of a curveball. And I got as far as I could get to with the magazine that was run by an independent publisher. And I was looking at corporates, and if you know the publishing world, brands like Centaur, who are very sadly diminished these days, and Haymarket similarly. I'd interviewed for those a couple of times, hadn't got anywhere, their loss rather than mine. What's the next step? But the thing that actually, one of the things that kind of changed, that made a big impact, actually, this is a bit where if you're now watching a reality TV program, they'd put this sentimental music on.
Right.
My mum got cancer, and I thought to me that you're only here once, right? And it was like, get on and do the things that are important.
Yeah.
There's not as much time as you think there might be.
Yeah.
And so it kind of spurred me on a bit. And there's a background story as well. Actually, I had never had an aspiration to be an entrepreneur. My granny, my mum's mum, was a very interesting woman, quite a challenging woman. But she was she set up a company in the 40s, and she was an entrepreneur. And that's the only history I think we'd put in the notes. If you want to ask about history, it's the only history in my company of someone being an entrepreneur. And in those days, quite challenging thing to do, I suspect.
Yeah.
And I've actually recently, I found recently in a book, a piece of headed notepaper from her company, her and my granddad's company that they ran in Bristol in the 40s and the 50s maybe. And I've got it framed now, and I had another copy,
amazing.
And I gave it to my cousin who's looking to set up a business as well. And it's kind of, it's sat around my desk on the wall, and I just look at it every day, and it kind of anchors me and makes me feel quite proud.
That is such a great story. Thank you for bringing that to us. And I think from this show perspective, I remember when I first set out on doing these talks, and I think somebody pretty close to me said, "Oh, they're all going to be the same. It's always going to be this. All these founders are going to be like this whole I was building, I was grinding, and then it all came together, and then I got investment, and they're going to all have the same kind of demeanor. They're all going to be super crazy driven, and it's totally the opposite. And I think that it sounds like the difference for you, that it's almost like becoming a founder was a symptom. And what happened next of actually some much bigger things at play. It sounds like you've had some amazing women in your life, very, very strong women that must have helped. And you've had a passion for something, and you've had a love for something, and I'm a founder. I've got my own company now. Seems to have been more rather than I cannot work for someone else. I have to work for myself. I have to build something. I have to build wealth. It's been more about the things that you're passionate about and the surroundings that you've had that have ended up leading you into being an entrepreneur as well. So totally goes against.
It is, yeah. It's fascinating you say that, and I'm, I as a journalist, I know no two interviews are the same, but I can understand, how you must have had a tremendous diversity of people through here, and for me, it was totally happenstance, and there could have been a juncture where I got a job at a bigger publishing company and slightly bigger job and more support and live the corporate life, and I probably could have been quite happy doing that, but it didn't happen. But I also think there's another thing that was important in the story is the moment where circumstances combine to make it happen. So with the first conversations we had, I was about 27 or 28. I can't remember precisely when it was that we started talking about it. And we launched when I was 13. James was 29. And I've since subsequently learned a lot about two examples. One is this is going to sound slightly strange, but bear with me. In the space race, right, in the 60s, the Apollo program, the guys who worked at Mission Control, if you've ever seen the pictures of them, there's all this banks of people sat in these buildings with white shirts and black ties and crew cuts, right? They were all 28, 29. And the same thing actually happened in the Industrial Revolution with which I love history. They're kind of George Stephenson kind of time. They in the 200 years ago when the first railways were launched, they were all about 28, 29. And there's something about being that age where you are old enough to be confident, but not too old to know. So not old to know what you shouldn't do, right? So you have that. It's that sweet spot, right, where you have the confidence to go and make mistakes and not be constrained by someone telling you or the kind of perhaps the kind of caution that creeps as you get older. And so I think that timing, it was happenstance, everything combined to make that an opportunity for me.
I can totally relate to that, actually. I think anyone else that's listening as well is going to either, if they happen to have been 28, 29 already, will now be in their minds going back and thinking, oh, okay, yeah, even if they didn't start a business. I had 2 children in 28 and 29.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's a
pivotal age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really good tip. And there is actually something that I want to just refer back to that you said that actually has just clocked me as an amazing takeaway from this conversation for anyone that's building a business, which is what your dad said to your mom when she thought the advert wasn't for her. Think about that, because, you get this people, and I think it's quite mean actually, people post on LinkedIn when they've had a sales message that wasn't appropriate and they're like, oh, salespeople, they're so terrible and annoying. And it's like, sorry for trying to make a living. But and actually, if it doesn't resonate with them, it's only because it wasn't meant to in the first place. Now, obviously, we get it wrong sometimes, and we should only ever be sending emails and LinkedIn DMs and content and directing our ads at people who it's for, but we can't. It's not perfect science. We're not always going to hit 100% of our ICP with every single piece of content. So if you ever feel as though something's not for you, the chances are it wasn't meant for you in the first place. And I think if you're the one who's putting that content together and you're building that those automations, that's something to consider. Who are you actually trying to talk to? It's a really good takeaway from this, I think.
It is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think if we see those kind of engagements every day, or those kinds of outreach every day, and they are frustrating. And I try to be, to not think down on the person sending them. But if they're doing that kind of, they should say the process is wrong, or they haven't been trained very well. So yeah, there's much more to it than that.
Yeah. Well, do you, I mean, as I know that what you're doing now is on the so we don't call it a community, but I'm going to call it that because
Sure.
it's kind of right. But as a someone who knows a lot about marketing, both in practice and theoretically as well, do you have any advice for anybody that's setting out on a journey of, okay, we need to get our demand gen working, they're building a business, or as I find in my journey, there's a lot of very, very established businesses that don't actually invest anything right now in marketing that are now starting to jump on the bandwagon. Do you have any thoughts about how they can avoid that kind of spray and pray approach and end up wasting a load of money on paid social that doesn't land, or just pissing people off, basically?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, first of all, you've got to be clear about your brand. Who are you and what's your point of difference in the market? If you don't understand that as a starting point, everything's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah.
And it does wrap up then with who your customers are. Understand who they are and what their pain points are, and speak to those things and speak to them in ways that are relevant and put yourself in the minds of your customers in terms of how that message will be received, by both in terms of the tone of the message, the style of the message, the format of the message, and the context of the message, because context is everything. I would also say, particularly if you're a company, one of the journeys that I've been on, well, the big journey I've been on since about a year ago, I kind of operationally exited the business I founded, B2B Marketing, is building my own set of activities, and a lot of it's been around. I have my podcast. I'm not trying to plug. I'm just trying to explain context.
Please do plug. We're all in. None of us are getting out here alive, Joel. So go ahead. Go for it.
My theme is around trust in B2B, and thought leadership. And as we get into this age where there's so much noise in the market, the power of this individual story and of the personality is only growing. If deployed effectively, is only growing and growing and growing. So use your founder, use your CEO, find your ambassador, and use them, deploy them in the right way. Make them understand that their voice is important, and it's not just they may not be comfortable doing that. You need to try to find a way to make them comfortable. And you need to convince them that it's worth their while to be doing these things, because particularly as a smaller company, if you're just starting to get to grips with marketing, there probably should be one or two people in the company who are going to have incredible resonance and power in terms of their communication. So put them at the heart of what you're doing.
Right. And would you say you do that in the form of kind of video content, or just have them regularly posting? Like, what's the best way to achieve that, do you think, as a founder?
It kind of depends.
I'm asking very selfishly right now, because I have a lot of very compelling founders that I work with that I would love to use as the brand kind of.
I would. It kind of depends on, but one way or other, they should be part of that. Yeah. My perspective is that you need to. The best way to do it is to try and have a thought leadership position which is a topic which you can be part of, a foundational part of your marketing, which can be continually reinforced, and then work out where that person plays in the communication of that. And it depends on their propensity, it depends on their skills, it depends on the level of marketing support you've got. There are a lot of podcasts these days. That's a very good format, but it's not going to work for everybody. Yeah. There are speaking events and activities. That's not going to work for everybody. There could be video series. There could be video activity that you're doing, video blogging. There's lots of ways that you can deploy that person's resonance and authenticity, which is a challenging word, but I think it's a good word. It's about humanizing the brand.
Yeah, I completely am on board with that, and I think that's a really good way to. And it's actually, in some ways, can be much more cost effective than trying to create from scratch. You don't need any actors. You don't need any big productions. Just get the person who's passionate, the most passionate, and get them representing the brand. But
you can also, and that's absolutely right, you don't need all of those things. But one of the ways that AI is helping with that is you can use AI to increase the scale of the content that person can create.
Yes. Yeah, really, really, really good. Back to you for a second, and we'll start to wrap up soon. But I hope you don't feel like I've interrogated you too much up until now. But it seems like, looking back, and it must be nice for you to kind of look over your shoulder every now and again and say, actually, in a world where, marketing has changed so much between when you started out on this journey to now, and you've navigated that and you've ridden those waves, and I'm sure there's been ups and downs and it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but ultimately you did it. You survived it. The business is still alive today, and you've done what most people who sit on that couch want to do at some point, which is have a really nice exit, and still see it grow and still see things go well. So that's great. How was that decision for you, though, to actually say, I'm going to hand over the reins now. I'm going to exit the business?
Well, I'll just be really clear about this. I operationally have exited. I'm still one of the major. My shareholding isn't changed, and I'm still a board director.
Right.
But your question is a very good one, very pertinent one, very, very wise one. And the answer is it was tough. And it wasn't what I necessarily wanted, but for various reasons, it's pragmatically the right thing to do. I kind of jokingly describe it as my Mick Jagger moment, because you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. Because we appointed a CEO about 3 years ago, Richard O'Connor, who's doing a fantastic job running the business. And he took over my business partner's job immediately. And then gradually, the plan was always for me I was very central to everything the business was doing on a kind of product perspective. And as a spokesperson for the business, there was the face of the business. And for various reasons, that was less optimal in a new world. And also there's a challenge whereby, which I completely understand, that you need clarity, this team need clarity of reporting, and having a founder popping up with creative ideas wasn't necessarily, whilst those ideas, whether those ideas were any good or not, it wasn't necessarily helpful whose agenda were we following. So after some conversations, we decided I was going to step back from the business, but I had no intention of retiring. So what did I do? So I was going to write a book, and then I realized that writing a book was going to take a lot of time. It was going to make me have to go and sit in a room, as we discussed earlier on, not seeing anybody for weeks on end. And I intellectually would like to write a book. I get stimulus from being in the market and understanding what's going on. So I've kind of settled into a role as a podcaster, as an influencer, as a conference speaker, as an advisor. And I'm really enjoying it. And it's definitely not fully formed yet or set in stone yet. There's development, oscillation, opportunities for me to do different things and develop it along where the opportunity is. And it's given me currency to be out there talking to the people in the market and learning what's going on.
Fantastic. And when people hear that, they'll probably be thinking, well, how can I come to one of these talks? How can I get involved? How can I hear more, Joel? So plug away. What's the best way for people to continue to follow what you're doing? And because I mean, you've given us a handful of amazing tips and nuggets of brilliance. So I can't imagine how many you would get if you came to one of your events or listened to one of your talks. So talk to us about that and how we can get more involved.
Well, the easy way to follow me is to follow one of my social channels. So LinkedIn, I post very regularly on there, and I, do Joel Harrison B2B on LinkedIn, I'll come up. You can also, if you'd like just to consume content, I have a YouTube channel where I post a lot of stuff. I post at least one video a week because my podcast will go out that way. You can subscribe to the podcast if you like audio. It's called Trust and Influence in B2B, and you can get it via Apple or via Spotify. You can also get it on YouTube as well if you'd like to do that. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm less prolific on Instagram. I'm trying to change that, but it was just seems to be the correlation of the other channels. So lots of ways you can do that. If you're interested in learning more about B2B marketing, you want to come to one of B2B Marketing's events. They do fantastic events for marketing managers up to CMOs. The next big one coming up is in July. It's called Ignite. There'll be about 700 B2B marketers there. It'll be a fantastic day.
I will be there.
It's a great day. It's a really inspirational day, and you get a sense of the energy of the room and all the people involved in the market. It's really inspirational. So definitely come to that. Connect with me. I'd love to connect with people. I'm always up for connecting.
I have to vouch for you there. You for someone that is very busy and has a lot going on. I've always found you very accessible.
Thank you.
And very, very happy to share wisdom and knowledge as well, without kind of saying, well, it'll cost you, which is the best way to be. A couple more things I want to ask you before I let you crack on. What's next for you personally? Because I know you do a lot of extracurricular stuff, and you try and have a balanced life. We talked about kind of being around people and how that's quite important to you. So what does life for Joel look like now, and what's ahead?
Well, so I balance lots of different stuff that I do in terms of trying to have a working week that is interesting and engaging. We're discussing earlier on trying to carve out some time to do some cycling during the week as well, so I can say this is my time. I work hard, but I don't work necessarily all of the hours that the conventional office hours. The premium that I'm getting from the role I have is to be able to spend my time in the way I want to spend it. So a bit of a balance there. I'm still ambitious though. I still want to achieve a lot in terms of, I don't know where my personal journey is going to take me in terms of the things that I can do in the market, the resonance that I can have. And that's, there are things unfolding on that one all the time. So I'm only really a year into this kind of journey. And it's, and I get huge satisfaction out of kind of creative process and the output from that and the feedback from it. And so lots more I want to do there. And I aspire to do to do more cultural things. But I have an 8-year-old son, so a lot of activities tend to be focused around what he wants to do.
Well, yes, I completely resonate with that. They think that you are there to serve, and that's it. And I've got news for you, that doesn't get any better, because I have now a 15 and 16-year-old that think I'm there to drive. And
Taxi service.
That is my ATM and taxi service. Yeah, he's my purpose in their lives. But yeah, so I can totally resonate. They are very time consuming, but amazing all the same. A lot of people that consume this podcast or that sit on the couch are kind of building something. We have a lot of early stage founders as our audience. What would be the kind of key things that you would say to them in terms of the pitfalls that maybe they should try to avoid, or just as kind of words of wisdom as we close off?
I guess motivation is something which is always fluctuates and is challenging to maintain, and I urge you to keep going. There's a wonderful Churchill quote which I heard recently, is when you're going through hell, keep going, because you're probably doing something right. It's difficult and challenging, but keep going. Don't lose faith, and don't lose faith in yourself. Give yourself a break is one of the things, because we're often our own harshest critics. So definitely do that. I think another area, if you're an early stage business, that I remember from our early stage, I remember seeing a kind of schematic, a quirky diagram that's described this on LinkedIn. You've got, the expected trajectory of your business, and it's like a line graph with a perfectly straight 45-degree angle.
Yes, I've seen the chart. Yeah.
Whereas the reality is like it's all over the place. Yeah. And that's inevitably going to happen, right? Sometimes the business that you think that you're founding isn't the one that you end up in quite soon afterwards. So don't be afraid to give yourself a break, but don't be afraid to recognize that the opportunity that you're creating isn't quite what you thought it was at the start, and to pivot around that. Because great businesses have very different trajectories to where a success and greatness end up.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. And I think the universe sent you to me this week, because that's exactly what I needed to hear. I think I'm in one of those points of my own business where I'm thinking, what did I actually set out to do? Was it this? And actually, if the answer was, well, no, this isn't what I set out to do, the next question should be, am I happy? And do I like the way that it's going? Am I adding value? Am I adding impact? And if the case is yes, then just keep going, which is your first piece of advice, which I also needed to hear this week. So I feel like I'm in therapy right now. Thank you so much, Joel. Joel, it's been so amazing chatting to you. The time has absolutely flown. I am off now to subscribe to all of your content. I'm going to continue to consume that, as I recommend everybody else does as well. And I look forward to seeing you at Ignite as well, because I am really looking forward to coming along and listening to some people that are leading the way in B2B marketing. So thank you for inventing it. That was, I think we all owe you a massive favour.
I'm going to say thank you I've really enjoyed the last 20 years helping to formalise it and be a figurehead for it. It's been a really tremendously rewarding thing, and I've so enjoyed the people I've met along the way, and I'm not finished yet, so I'm looking to enjoy meeting a lot more in the future.
Glad to hear it. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you. So thanks so much for the invitation.